Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back. This is Frank Agin, the Networking RX podcast. Today is another guest day. I've got not just a great guest, I've got a great returning guest. Brian Ahearn was with us earlier this year. I can look up the exact date, don't need to look it up. But he was with us earlier this year, and we were talking back then, and I said I need to get you back on. Last month, in August, he released a book. The name of the book is Influence People, Powerful Everyday Opportunities to Persuade that are Lasting and Ethical. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks for having me back. I really appreciate it, Frank, and I'm really happy to get a chance to talk a little bit about the book. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, I'm sure. I know I've written books. I know it's a lot of work. I know you've been busy. So let's talk about not the book itself. Well, I mean, not about the journey itself per se, but just the content of the book. In so many words, how would you define this book? What are people going to come away with?
Well, the book is all about how to influence people, and there's all kinds of research that's available, more than 7 decades of research from social psychology, behavioral economics, and now neuroscience. And what I have found over the last 15 years is I've been working with people teaching this. They're fascinated by that. But the trouble that they have sometimes is, okay, how do I take this and actually use it? That was a really cool study. I've talked about it, but how do I take it and put it into practice? And Influence People is really taking that complicated science and bringing it down into everyday usable things that will help people have more success at the office and frankly, some more peace and happiness at home.
Okay, I think that's great. Some of the things I run into from time to time with respect to networking is people have opinions, they have conjecture as to what people should be doing or not doing. And here, what you're telling me is, hey, I'm going to tell you some stuff in this book, and it's not just me telling you, there's actual university-based research behind it.
Correct. People's good advice doesn't always help us. There are certain people who, quite frankly, do things incorrect, but they've already gained such a following for any number of reasons that they get people listening to them. But even those people, if they actually understood what the science said and used it in their communications, would be even more successful than they actually are. And so I don't want people to listen to somebody's good advice, try it, it fails, and then they think, well, I'm just not that person. I think anybody can learn what the science has to say, and then they can begin to use it. Just like you and I can learn what it means to live a healthy lifestyle. Doesn't mean we'll be the next Arnold Schwarzenegger, but we can begin to do that and be healthier. And I just want people to move on that spectrum and be more influential, more persuasive, so that they can get more accomplished at work and have better relationships at home.
Well, what it sounds like, in looking through the book, I'm going to use the term mechanical, and that's not really a good term for it, but humans, to a degree, we are mechanical. We follow patterns, and it's not perfectly patterns, but generally speaking, if certain things are done, we'll get certain responses. Again, it's not 100% reliable, like mixing 2 chemicals per se, but over a vast number of people, you're going to get a similar reaction, depending upon what you're doing.
That's correct. I always tell people this isn't a magic wand. I cannot guarantee you that when I interact with somebody, they're going to do what I want. What I can guarantee you is you give me enough people that I interact with, and let's say the traditional way of interacting with people gets you what you want 10% of the time, that employing certain principles of influence might move that to 20, 30, 40, 50%. But what I know is I will get significantly more people, because when you understand how people typically think and behave, and then you begin to adjust your communication based on what the scientific research says, you will have more people saying yes. Again, if I go back to the example of healthy living, there's no guarantee, Frank, that if you eat right and exercise right, that you won't get cancer. But we do know this, that lots of people who eat right and exercise right will outlive those who don't, because science has already proven that to us. So on the whole, people will have a lot more success when they start relying on what science says and not what someone's best advice is.
Okay, great. You use the word ethical in the title, and I think that's important. You and I have had conversations. We touched on it a little bit in the earlier podcast interview. Ethics are important to you. Can you touch on that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. If it weren't for ethics, I wouldn't be doing this. I mean, that's just the bottom line. Because when I came across Cialdini's material over 15 years ago, I was intrigued for a number of reasons. One, doing sales training, it explained the psychology that underlies sales. Two, it was appealing on the level of intellect because it was all based on research. And then third was his stance on ethics. He was very clear about non-manipulative ways to get people to do things. Well, I saw his presentation at Stanford, signed up for their marketing materials. And then what happened one day is one of the Stanford marketing flyers came across my desk, and I saw Cialdini's picture, and it said big bold letters, bestseller. And right underneath it, it said, call it influence, persuasion, or even manipulation. And my first reaction was, I can't believe they actually used that word to try to promote the video. So the ethical part of me felt compelled to address it. So I emailed Stanford and I said, I don't know anybody who wants to be manipulated, and I don't know anybody who wants to be known as a good manipulator. That one word cannot be helping your sales, but it really could be hurting. Well, I never heard from Stanford, but sometime later my phone rang at work, and it was Robert Cialdini's office. And one of his representatives was calling, and she said, I'm calling to personally thank you on behalf of Dr. Cialdini. You sent an email to Stanford, and because of it, they're changing the marketing of our video, and we wanted to say thank you. And it was during that conversation that she said, you know, if your company needs a guest speaker ever, Dr. Cialdini travels the world and talks about this. I said, I know, or I sit next to the woman who books our speakers. Would you like me to transfer you? And as fate would have it, in the summer of 2004, he was in Columbus several times to address the insurance agents that represented our company. That's a long story to say this, Frank. If it weren't for that word manipulation and my response to it in wanting to do things the right way, I would not be here today, because the whole course of my career and to some degree my life would be different, because I probably wouldn't be doing this. So it means the world to me that people take this and use it in an upright, ethical way to try to get people to do things that they need them to do.
Okay, great. I do want to interject quickly for people who don't know, Dr. Robert Cialdini, and correct me, Brian, if I'm wrong, he is probably the world's foremost authority on persuasion and influence. And you are one of 20 people worldwide that have been trained and certified by him personally to use his methods. So that's probably should have at the beginning, but that's a big buildup for you. So.
Yeah, you're correct on both accounts. He is the most cited living social psychologist in the world when it comes to the topic of the science of influence. And he has only personally trained 20 people around the world. And I'm very fortunate to be one of those 20.
Okay. Let's dig into the book a little bit. 700,000 great reasons to use a Post-it note.
Yep.
How much,
do we have time to go over all 700,000?
Give me the Cliff Note version. Yeah, but no, I think that was a great story. If you would share that, that would be great.
Okay. So this is an example in the book. There are stories, business case studies. There are also practical examples. There's some things about social media. And this falls under some of the practical examples of using influence to move the needle. So there was a study that was done where some individuals who were sending out a survey wanted to see if they could increase the response rate. And so in one scenario, they just sent out the survey with a cover letter. And when they did that, 36% of the people who got the survey responded. In another scenario with another group of people, they sent out the same survey with the same cover letter, but they put a little handwritten note on it, something like, thanks for helping out, Frank. And then when people got that, 48% took the survey. So that's a nice jump to go from 36 to 48%. But they tried one last time and they put a yellow sticky note on it. It was the same survey, same cover letter, and even the same message. Thanks for helping out, Frank. But it was on a yellow sticky note. And under that scenario, 75% of the people took the survey. And in a separate survey, the same thing happened, or a separate experiment where they more than doubled the response rate using the yellow sticky note. Now, people always find that really interesting, but how do you practically use it? Here's what happened in my former company. Many years ago, I came back from an extended Christmas break and immediately was called into a room with about half a dozen other people. And the situation that we faced was this. In one of the operating states, we had overpaid 150 insurance agents, accidentally doubled their December commission. It was a $700,000 mistake. Our charge was, how do we get that money back as quickly as possible? And we couldn't just press a button and electronically take it out. So what we had to do, we settled on a letter will have to go out from the home office accounting manager to each agency, telling them how much we've overpaid and asking them to send the money back. So fortunately, the accounting manager went through my training the year before and heard the story about the sticky notes. So I turned to him and I said, Steve, you remember the story about the sticky notes? And he said, yes. I said, if you don't have time to put a sticky note on every one of those 150 letters and personalize it, call me, I'll do it. And he said, no, I remember, I'll do it. So he does it, the letters go out. 2 weeks later, I called him up and I said, how's the collection going? And his exact words, Frank, were, I'm floored. And I said, why? And he said, we've already got money back from 130 of the 150 agents in full. Now, the optimist in me said, we didn't get it all back?
Right.
And he laughed at me, like most people do. He's like, come on, man, we're talking about money. He goes, I expected most of them to say, it's your problem, you fix it, or put me on a payment plan, or take it out of next month's commission. He goes, anything but sitting down and writing that check in full. He goes, I'm floored. And when we had lunch a few months later, he said that we had collected the money from 147 of the 150 in full. Here's a guy who's dealing with agents and money and insureds every day. He knew it was significant. And that, to me, is the practical application of understanding this stuff, but then putting it into place in a way that helps the bottom line for your organization.
Right. And the $700,000 reasons, $700,000 is what they basically overpaid, and that's what they were collecting back.
Exactly. Yep.
And that's no small number when you're talking about 30 days of use of money. That's
yeah, and especially when, as an insurance company, in the month of January, we're calculating how much bonus money we're going to be turning around and paying agents. Having an extra $700,000 in the bank would be nice to pay those bonuses. So it was probably a more critical time than ever that we were able to get that money back very, very quickly.
right. Now, again, totally ethical. You just understand how people think.
Yeah,
So that's how I look at it.
absolutely. I look at something like that, Frank. If you happen to have the good fortune of being raised by somebody who taught you manners, and you always said please and thank you and no thank you, and people like you because of that, and they more willingly do things, well, you're going to keep saying please, thank you, and no thank you, right? Other people have to be taught that. Maybe they weren't fortunate enough to be raised in a family like that. I don't think that just because they had to be taught that as an adult, that all of a sudden makes it nefarious or something like that, where, oh, they're just trying to technique me by saying please and thank you. We all could stand to have better manners, and some people just learn them at different points in life.
Yeah. Well, I think everything you say, implied in everything you say, I should put it that way, implied in everything that you say is a level of authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, obviously if you're just doing things to do things, then it starts to border on manipulation. But if knowing that, people respond to having a personal note, and respond even more if it's on a sticky note for whatever reason, does the color matter? I don't know. It's probably just the fact that somebody took a little extra time to put a sticky note on their whatever it is.
That is, it's engaging what's called reciprocity. When you do a little more, people feel like they should do a little bit more for you. And simply putting that sticky note on, then writing the message by hand is really engages some reciprocity. Now, if this were something that was manipulative, then certainly I wouldn't want people to know, right? I'd want to keep that under the radar. I publicly talk about this all the time. And if any one of those agents would have asked me the question, I would have said, we use the sticky note because several studies show you will respond more, and we needed to get that money back quickly. I mean, that was very clear in the letter. So this isn't, black ops stuff and things like that. Anybody could ask me anything that they want, and I'd be very clear about why do I do what I do.
Yeah. No, I don't question it at all. But I know there's the skeptics out there, and I want to get the point across to them.
So Frank, let me say this too then about ethics. When we talk about ethics, I've set up why it was so important to me, but somebody might be wondering, well, then what does it mean to be ethical? And I always say this: we tell the truth and we don't hide the truth. When we are interacting with somebody, we're always forthright about the strengths and the weaknesses of whatever it is that we're talking about. But we learn when we understand how to influence people that how we talk about our weaknesses can actually make a difference. If I mention early on, if you were looking at my home and I was trying to sell my home, if there's a crack in the basement wall, I don't want to put something in front of that or hope that you don't notice. You know what I would do early on? I'd say, Frank, because I consider myself to be an ethical person, I want to let you know up front, there's a crack in the basement wall. And we would talk about that. That might mean I adjust the price, but you would never leave that sale and feel like if I had known there was a crack, I wouldn't have bought that house. So I tell the truth and I don't hide the truth. And the next thing is we're always looking to create a win-win situation. It's not enough for me as somebody trying to persuade another person to just get what I want. It has to be, I help them get what they want or they need. And if they can leave that situation and they're happy with what they got and I'm happy and I've told the truth, I think I'm being an ethical influencer.
Agreed. Totally agreed. Chevy Chase. You have a whole chapter on Chevy Chase and things what he didn't do before vacation. I think hopefully most people have seen that movie. That's iconic.
Yeah, that was a fun one to write. So the setup on that was obviously Chevy Chase was a bungler in all kinds of ways, and so it's a funny opening. But the reality is this, Frank, that when people go on vacation, whether it's summer, spring break, Christmas, a lot of times they all do the same thing. They change their voicemail and they turn on their out of office and then they take off. But imagine this. If you go, before you go on vacation, a week before you go, you send a message to like your best customers. If maybe you're in sales or customer service, you send this email out to your best customers. It says, hey, just want to give you a heads up. Beginning next Monday, I'm going to be unavailable. Taking a week of vacation, going down to Florida with the family. And because it's vacation time, I won't be looking at my voicemail or email. I hope you understand. But I wanted to give you a heads up in case there's something that you need to talk to me about. Okay. Then you send that out. You will have people who respond to that and say, thank you for letting me know. I really need to talk to you. Right. Now, if I didn't do that, they might call the week I'm on vacation. And if I'm not there, even though I might say, here's who's handling my work, they might still hang up and think, I don't want to talk to somebody who's unknown. This might be the right opportunity to give that other guy or that other lady an opportunity on this particular thing. And you never want to lose those opportunities. So by providing that service up front, it's called scarcity. Once people know that you're not going to be available, they'll want you and your time more. They will tend to respond. And here's the great thing. When somebody would call and say something like, hey, Brian, thanks so much for letting me know you were going to be gone because I really need to talk to you. I would very quickly say, can I ask you a question? And they'll say, sure. And I'll say, don't your other reps let you know when they're going to go out of town a week in advance? And they're going to search their memory banks for a moment and they're going to say, no, nobody's ever done that before. And then I would say, that's why you want to do business with me. There's a lot of things outside my control in this world, but giving you the best service possible is something I strive to do every day. What can I help you with? And they're going to start to remember that. Like, wow, Brian does this, but the other people don't. And that becomes a reason subconsciously they start picking up the phone and calling me.
Good. That's good. Now, as far as getting a copy of Influence People, you released it last month. It's on Amazon.
Yep.
Correct?
Yes.
It's Barnes and Noble.
Yep.
get a Kindle version or electronic version, or you can get a print version, correct?
Yep. We've got it in ebook and we've got it in paperback. And I've had a lot of questions about, will there be an audio version? And there will. This being my first book, it was a lot more time consuming. And Frank, you've written a lot of books, so you know, it was a lot more time consuming to do the marketing and just everything that was surrounded with it. So I just wanted to get it out there. And now I can take a breath and I can start to work on the audio version. So my goal is to have the audio version before year end.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate you being on the show today. Again, Brian Ahearn with the book Influence People, Powerful Everyday Opportunities to Persuade That Are Lasting and Ethical. Brian, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best way?
Well, first you can go to my website, which is influencepeople.biz, and my contact information is all over there. There's also lots of resources there, podcasts like this that I've been on, videos, blogs, things like that. The other way is to connect with me on LinkedIn. So just look up Brian Ahearn or put in Influence People. Either of those should probably pop me to the top of the page. And to your listeners, if you don't put a personal note to say like, hey, I heard you on Frank's podcast, just be ready. I will send an email or I will send a message back to ask how you found me. I just like to understand why people are reaching out, where the traffic is coming from.
Well, I would have to say that anybody listening to this, if you do anything on LinkedIn without taking the extra time and putting a note in this, to whoever you're contacting, whoever's contacting you, you need to re-listen to this.
Yeah.
Because that's the electronic version of the yellow sticky note.
Absolutely.
So appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Frank. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connections. All rights reserved.